Omagyanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Astyatya Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Om Vishnupad Panamansa Paribraja Kacharya Stotra Sarasri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai Navadip Tham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you all very much for coming. Om Gyana Timidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lavita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deen Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vancha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, welcome to all. My respects to all. We're meeting you today from Cary, North Carolina, driving south. We have with us today Brajabi Hari Prabhu, and there may be some other devotees from the North Carolina area, as well as our steady crew. For the benefit of those who are new, this is a weekly Ishtagosti, which means we talk about any Krishna conscious topic. But lately, for the past few weeks, we've been doing a mini-series called What Are the Four Rules? Our ground rules for this conference are that you're welcome to ask questions at any time. You can just use the raised hand feature to signal that you have a question, or you can type something into the chat box. So we welcome live spoken questions or typed questions as you like, and pretty much at any point, anything goes. Of course, the four rules are the rules that devotees agree to follow at the time of initiation. The rules are no intoxicants, no gambling, no meat eating, and no illicit sex. And then, of course, there's the positive rule to chant Hare Krishna at least 16 rounds a day. So we've been talking about these four rules. And one point I've made is that we're not looking here to criticize anyone who, for their standard of devotional life. It's really meant for introspection and for help, and especially to give clarity to what it is that Prabhupada said these rules were, because not everyone knows, or we know but we forget. So we've been examining things from that point of view. We're also not concerned here with trying to address or offer opinions about the advice that our different ISKCON gurus may offer their disciples. That's really their prerogative, and it's just outside of our purposes to talk about that here. But we do want to clarify what it is that Prabhupada taught, and then things go on from there. That's our starting point. All right, we've talked about, and these four rules are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. Striyam sunam, what is that? Yutam panam striyam sunam yatra dharma chaturvida. Kali was given permission to live in four places where there's gambling, meat eating, illicit sex, or intoxication. We've talked about in previous sessions gambling, intoxication, meat eating, and then last week, I believe, we began with the fourth rule, no illicit sex. The fourth rule, all of these rules are fairly simple, but when you go further, we find out that Srila Prabhupada elaborated on them or explained them in such a way that they are perhaps more expansive than we might have originally thought, or by a, what's the word, just by a quick understanding, we might have thought. The Prabhupada explained this rule, no illicit sex, in a letter to Satsrup Maharaj. Well, let's see. Actually, I won't quote. The overview is that Prabhupada said no illicit sex means no sex outside of marriage, and within marriage only for having good children. He further explained that that means once in a month. That sex should not be more than once in a month at the time of greatest possibility for having a child. The sex life is not simply for sense gratification. Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita, as it is, chapter 16, although he has a wife, a householder should not use his senses for sex life unnecessarily. There are restrictions for the householders, even in sex life, which should only be engaged in for the propagation of children. If he does not require children, he should not enjoy sex life with his wife. Modern society enjoys sex life with contraceptive methods or more abominable methods to avoid the responsibility of children. This is not in the transcendental quality, but is demoniac. If anyone, even if he is a householder, wants to make progress in spiritual life, he must control his sex life and should not beget a child without the purpose of serving Krishna. If he is able to beget children who will be in Krishna consciousness, one can produce hundreds of children. But without this capacity, one should not indulge only for sense pleasure. And the same thing he says in purport to 711. We've quoted this before, but for the benefit of those who are new. The strong man's strength should be applied to protect the weak. Similarly, sex life, according to religious principles, dharma, should be for the propagation of children, not otherwise. The responsibility of parents is then to make their offspring Krishna consciousness. And the verse there is dharmaviruddha bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. Krishna says that sex life that is dharma avirud, not contrary to dharma, represents me. So it's not that we're against sex. Sex is accepted, but it should be not contrary to religious principles. And Prabhupada explains here what those religious principles are. In a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam, even in sex, if we can remember Krishna, how? Krishna says, dharma viruddha kamosmi. Sex life, which is given permission in the Shastra, that is Krishna. The Shastra gives you permission for sex life only for begetting nice children, not for enjoyment. That is illicit sex. If you make love, fish, and have sex life, that is illicit sex. So that is dharma virud. So we can adjust our material activities, eating, sleeping, mating, and fearing. It can be adjusted in relationship with Krishna, provided we take direction from Krishna. Even eating, sleeping, mating can be utilized as Krishna consciousness if you follow the rules and regulations. So this is, if you simply act for satisfying Krishna, then you are all right. And as soon as you do it for your own sense gratification, karma bandhana, you become bound up by the laws of karma. We should be very careful, therefore. let's see. So these are the principles that Srila Prabhupada explained, which are radical according to modern Western practice or modern Western way of life, and perhaps even radical from modern Indian life, at least in the cities. This people will say, what? But why? Because our purpose is to get free from material existence. We're not just a sort of a social club or a nice religion to belong to, but Krishna consciousness is meant to put a solution to the problems of material existence, to give us freedom from material existence. So that's a big undertaking, a big project to get free from the clutches of the illusory energy. So that requires some discipline, because the sex attachment is very strong. If we're simply, what's the word? If we're unable to control that sex drive, then spiritual realization becomes difficult business. And if we can control it, then spiritual life becomes quite a clear road. Okay. Any questions so far? And there are notes in the chat box that are Dukahadri Mataji, my god sister, who has been a regular attendee, has been transferred from the hospital that she was in to a nursing home for 2 weeks of physical therapy. She's been suffering from severe arthritis, crippling arthritis, really. So we're praying for her welfare. Okay, Tulsi Priya says, I get the feeling that some devotees may feel that rules about no sex except for children are a kind of punishment or an imposed austerity, rather than the natural behavior of someone trying to avoid entanglement in Maya. Is it that they think as long as they are practicing Krishna consciousness, then how much can sex with one's spouse do damage to one's spiritual life? Well, let's look at a few of these assumptions. One is this idea, one is that it is a natural tendency, that quotation I've read before. Let me find it just right now. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, Loke vyavavayang misha madhya seva, nityahi jantur nahi tatra chodana, vyavastatis teshu vivaha yagya, suragrahayar asu nivritta ishta. The meaning is that these are tendencies of the conditioned souls to want to have sex, to want to eat meat, to want to drink some intoxicating beverage, to want to gamble. These are tendencies that are there in conditioned life, no doubt, and sometimes very strong tendencies. And therefore, these things are to be regulated. It's not that the Vedic literature says, no, 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 no. Even mediating is allowed under very restricted circumstances. You can, once a month on the dark moon night, you can sacrifice a goat to the goddess Kali, and you can whisper in the goat's ear, now I'm killing you, now you can come back and kill me. So it's not prohibited, it's allowed, but it's restricted. Similarly, there's some rituals in which liquor is accepted, and sex is also accepted, but within marriage and for a good purpose, for service. So that service is counted when there's the intention for getting good children. there are different points. First of all, this is one of them, that sex is meant to be purposeful. It's not just that we have senses, so we're meant to gratify them. And that will make us happy. It won't. But the real purpose of, or the real yajna, or the real offering of sex, according to religious principles, is that, all right, we'll have sex, but for Krishna's service. And what is that service? It's for having good children. In the Vedic culture, having good children is so important, because we see from practical experience that when there's good breeding, as they say, and good upbringing, and then you get children who can really make progress in spiritual life, who can wonderfully advance in spiritual culture, and who are really eligible for participating in Krishna consciousness and bringing others to Krishna consciousness and getting free from Maya's clutches and helping others become free. Those kind of children, we'd like to have thousands and thousands and thousands. But children who are, accidental and not wanted, and perhaps without benefit of marriage, and with begotten in a consciousness just of lust, such children will have that consciousness, what's the word, practically impressed upon them, even from the point of conception. The Vedic literature says that the consciousness of the parents at the time of conception determines what kind of, or influences what kind of consciousness the child will have. So, just like these days we find that there's, the parents are drug addicts, and the child is born already with a, I got to have a drug. He's already intoxicated by some narcotic. That's gross, of course, but even more subtle. Even on the subtle platform, these things are there. So the first thing is it's purposeful. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of Varna Sankara, which means, Prabhupada's translation is unwanted population. Children who are just born. We don't know why they were born. They don't know why they were born. The parents don't know why they were born, somehow or other. And that Varna Sankara population, Sankarad Narakayaiva, can make the world hellish. Whereas godly offspring can make the world godly. So that's the first thing. It's the Vedic culture was so careful about bringing into the world good children. The next thing is that no, sex is not just, it's not for punishment. It's not for spoiling anyone's fun, as it were. But this is the biggest attachment to material life, is this desire to enjoy sex. And if we have unrestricted sex, then, as described in Bhagavatam, Kanduya nena kariyori vidukha dukam tripyanti neha kripana bahudukha bhaja. The Prahlad Maharaj says, Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukhami tujjam. When there's householder life just meant for enjoying sex, or where the focal point, the high point is sexual enjoyment, the happiness is meager. Grihamedi sukham hi tujjam, paltry happiness. Prahlad Maharaj compares it to the happiness, to the relief one gets by scratching an itch. Kanduyanena kariyori vidukha dukha. You scratch the itch, but the itch doesn't go away. It just increases. And the miseries increase. Eva dukha dukha. Tripyanti neha. One is never satisfied. Tripyanti neha kripana bahudukha bhaja. one just multiplies one's miseries. Even in so many ways, one's mind becomes miserable because he's hoping for this great pleasure from sex, and sex is always really a disappointment. It can never live up to the hype. And the senses never say, oh, that was great, now we're done, now we're satisfied. No, we want more, we want better, we want different. And then where's spiritual life when the mind is agitated and what's the word, preoccupied with thoughts of sex? It's not just kind of a small thing, like a glass of milk or something. It's serious business. As Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, that sex, pleasure, and Krishna consciousness go ill together. If one is serious about wanting to get free from material existence, then one has to restrict sex life. And that was Prabhupada's desire for us, that we get free from material existence, not that we just hang around here with, some superficial trappings of Krishna consciousness, but that we actually get the desired result, which is not just freedom from material existence, but love for Krishna. And how will we develop love for Krishna if we really have so much love for the enjoyment of the physical body? It won't be possible. It just seems that if Krishna didn't want us to indulge in sex except for children, then we wouldn't have the urge except when we were ready for children. Not my thinking, but the general rationale, philosophically. But yeah, if Krishna didn't want us to have children, sex except for children, he would have made it that way. If Krishna didn't want us to have to drink, he wouldn't have given us an urge to drink. If he didn't want us to smoke, he wouldn't have given us an urge. But all these things are there. One has a natural tendency to want to drink, to want to smoke, to want to gamble, to want to do so many things. And therefore restriction is there for the conditioned soul. The liberated souls don't need to be told. They automatically are detached from these things. But the conditioned souls are strongly attracted to these things. And therefore regulation is necessary. That's basic in Bhagavad Gita. What is that? There's a verse that's coming to mind, but it's not fully coming to mind. Anyway, in many places, this is made clear that one has to, certainly it's like basic. Yoga means Indriya Samyama, controlling the senses. That implies that the senses are not automatically going to control themselves. The children, they want to play. They don't want to study. But the parents say, no, you have to study. Otherwise, what will become of your life? Just by way of sort of a fun comment, Indra Maharaj wrote to me the other day that his father, both of his parents were top graduates from Stanford University, and but they said to him, with the grades that you're getting, you have to study. With the grades you're getting, you'll never amount to anything in this material world. He said, so it was a blessing from his parents. He's unfit for the real world. Yes.
One final thing. So I forget, I think it's in the Gita, but I'm not sure. Prabhupada talks about the Adi Ras, the original sex psychology. Mm-hmm. And so and I always found that a very intriguing term. And we talk about, the material world being a perverted reflection, and that the sex urge is also the perverted reflection of prema. And so would it be safe to say then that if people are plagued by troublesome desires for sex, that it's an indication of that their prema has been perverted or corrupted, and they, or are the two disconnected? And it's
no, that's our basic problem in the material world. Nityasiddha Krishna Prema Sadhuka Bunai. Our natural propensity is to love Krishna. But in material life, that's the last thing we want to do. We want to remember everything else. We want to do everything else. We want to be the enjoyer. Why should Krishna be the enjoyer? It's the whole problem of material life. So if one advances, the more one advances in Krishna consciousness, the more one understands this material world is not here for my enjoyment. Everything is for the service of Krishna. Prabhupada said to yeah, there's a letter to Madhusudan Prabhu, my godbrother. You should always remember that wife is not a machine for sense gratification. You know, the people may think that it's great, I get married and then I've got, you know, like there's they had these things, this is an old cultural reference, Pez dispensers, you know, they were like little they looked like little Zippo lighters, and you press the button and you got a little candy. Anyway, that's what it was. So, you know, the wife is not a Pez dispenser. You know, you press the button and you get you get your shot of enjoyment.
I thought you were going to say on tap.
Yeah. So it's meant to be. It's meant to be a team for service to Krishna, not a program for my happiness, my sense gratification. My happiness will best be there when I serve Krishna, and the wife is meant to be an assistant in that purpose, in that project. So it's good here. I want some ideal families of Krishna consciousness should be established in your country so that people can see that our movement is not one-sided or dry. So we do not want dry renouncers. Krishna himself married so many wives. As a Kshatriya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although he was to take sannyas at the age of 24 years, still he married twice within 20 years. Lord Nityananda Prabhu also married. Advaita Prabhu and Srivas Prabhu, they were also householders. So to become married is no impediment for advancement in Krishna consciousness. One should be vigilant only that he is not diverting from Krishna consciousness. One has to follow the footprints of the great acharyas, then everything is all right. I was also a married man, my family is still existing. So you should always remember that marriage is not impediment. The greatest enemy is forgetfulness of Krishna. There are many impersonalists and voidists. They renounce this material world very early in their life, just like Shankaracharya. He took sannyas at the age of 8 years. Lord Buddha left home just at the beginning of his youth. But we are not concerned with them. So I hope by this time, by serving this Krishna consciousness movement for the last 2 years, this is 1969, you must have gotten some taste of the nectarine. Now you must be fixed up and execute your specified duty as ordered by me, and then I am sure there will be no difficulty. But you should always remember that wife is not a machine for sense gratification. Wife is your half body for nourishing your Krishna consciousness status. So you are getting a wife who is already trained up in Krishna consciousness, and if you live carefully and faithfully, there will be no difficulty. That is the verdict of all acharyas. I think this will simplify your agitated mind. So these are, the further elucidation from Srila Prabhupada. Then Kendra says, would it be fair to say that Srila Prabhupada intended ISKCON to be a society of Brahmins who are expected to come to a higher standard, and that people in general, while benefiting from the guidance of the Brahmins, may not be expected to follow these principles? In other words, Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone's benefit, but only a very few will be expected to take vows of initiation. One thing, of course, is that these principles are not just for Brahmins. This is for human society. It's not that only the Brahmins are supposed to refrain from gambling or intoxication or meat eating or illicit sex. It's interesting because often Srila Prabhupada talks about everyone becoming Krishna consciousness, the whole world, every village and town, and so on. And yet he was uncompromising. To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans. That's from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. So you have on the one side that Prabhupada was hoping that this would be widespread, but he wasn't willing to water it down and make it something cheap, something, whatever we have to do to make it popular. If 4 rules aren't popular, well, how about 2 or 3 or 3.5? These were the rules, and Srila Prabhupada was uncompromising. So from one point of view, you said we'll have to do the best with what we have. If there were so many things, if we didn't have to wear, if we didn't, wear tilak, then more people could take to it. If we weren't following these 4 rules, if we let you chant kind of any mantra you want, if we worshipped any, gave scope for whoever you want to worship, Krishna's fine, Durga's fine, Shiva's fine, then we could be much bigger. But Srila Prabhupada wasn't willing to do that. Tulsi Priya said, but it seems the message is getting watered down to make the movement more popular. At least that seems to be the reasoning. Well, again, I'm sort of not for social commentary on this one. I'm just trying to say what Prabhupada taught. Lakshmana says, con respecto a la mujer, with regard to women, he escuchado algunas veces, I've heard sometimes, que el devoto dejó la esposa porque ella, dejó la esposa porque ella decidió tomar la vida espiritual serio. That a devotee left aside his wife because she decided to become serious about spiritual life. Pero como él todavía no estaba listo, ella debía esperar más hasta que él esté listo. Why wouldn't she wait and sort of be patient? Por como él todavía still no estaba listo, wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to wait. Yeah, these are sort of householder issues and difficult ones, I have to say. And perhaps I should also say outside my pay grade. I don't really counsel householders very much on the what would you say their personal relationships, especially the amorous side of their personal relationships. But it is a problem. The wife wants to be more strict, the husband wants to be less strict, or vice versa. And these are known problems. And I can't pretend that I've got the magic pill to solve the problem, except to say that the best thing is husband should be serious and the wife should be serious. That will be the best thing. The husband should be serious about Krishna consciousness and the wife should be serious, and they should help one another advance. That should be the purpose. Otherwise, it will be unhappiness for them both. It will be it's unhappy business. So I don't know if I can, sé que podía decir más que esto. I don't know if I could say anything more than that. Would anyone else like to jump in? Braja Bihari, do you have some thought about this, or anyone else who'd like to comment? It's not a one-man band here.
I don't have anything right now, Mars. If anything comes to my mind, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. Or yeah, anyone who'd like to.
Wait, if one is serious and one is not serious, is that the question?
Yeah, the husband is,
well,
basically one wants to follow strictly, the other wants to,
Well, the interesting thing, this comes up a lot in China. Even more so, whether one is a devotee, one's not a devotee. And unbelievable. I'd say like half of the. I used to preach in China a lot. What about Prabhupada's sister's example? Does that make any sense to address this? You know that example, right?
Yeah, her husband was would drink, and he would go out and I guess mix with women or whatever it was.
And also, I was thinking of she would cook fish for him, and she would take different pots, and then cook for her deities. Now, I'm not saying that's ideal, but it's just interesting. She kept her vow. She kept her duty as a wife, and she kept her duty, her spiritual duties as well. But it's. I think a lot of it has, so bringing it down to earth in terms of, us and everything, communications, and probably having like a conversation with a third person who they both really trust, and try to come up with something that they can live with. It's like Brahmatirtha Prabhu and I, when we're doing conflict resolution a lot, we're saying, all right, now we're not necessarily going to come up with something that we all love, but let's at least try to find something we can all live with. So those are my few thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. Tulsi Priya says, I've known of 2 such marriages where the couples were counseled to relax the standard. Both are now divorced. Maybe it's been different for others. Yeah. Okay, let's see. There's a few. Let me expand my chat box here so I can see better who's saying what. And did I miss anything, first of all? Yeah. Sankarshan says, one time I was packing up after a day of Harinam, and a compassionate Christian came up to me to say it wasn't necessary to try so hard. I took it that he meant self-control wasn't required, just the mercy of Jesus was the way out of material suffering. What can we think about such people and the destiny in store for them? Well, of course, I don't want to second guess exactly, what he really had in mind. And I don't think it really matters very much whether one is Christian, Hindu, or whatever in this regard. But I would just say that if we're thinking, of course, the Christian doctrine sometimes says, there are texts to this effect, that it's not by works that you'll be saved. It's not by works, but by the mercy of the Lord. And of course, we agree with that. But that doesn't, if it's not by works, well, then I can do any damn thing. Well, not really. Not really. And Jesus himself was clear about that, and it's clear from our acharyas also, that yes, on our own, what can we do? We need the mercy of the Lord. But, well, we need the mercy of the Lord, and until then, I'll just kind of like have a good time. No, that good time will be our enemy. Any spiritual culture in the world will require that one go through some voluntary inconvenience for the sake of spiritual advancement. That's called austerity. And that's certainly a big part of the Christian tradition, and any spiritual tradition worth its salt will require that. Not that just whatever my senses tell me, that's what I do, and at the same time I depend on the mercy of God. No. I depend on the mercy of God, and I try to follow God's instructions, which are given for my benefit. Venkatesh says, as the world is getting deeper into new terrible forms of sense gratification, which they certainly are, how will devotees be able to quote Prabhupada and scriptures in novel situations? Well, of course, just approaching outsiders and waving a book at them and quoting may not be effective. We have to try this way and that way to present things in a reasonable fashion but the real thing, how will people be saved? Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama. For the people in general, Krishna Kirtan, that will purify the hearts of the people of Kali Yuga. As their hearts become purified, then they want to know, how can I make more spiritual progress? Then we can tell them, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. First point is to wake them up a little. And when they come forward, well, here are the things that you can do to make further progress. Okay. Murli Gopal says, knowing that this principle is so difficult to follow by so many in our society, how is it that we don't have more practical seminars to help devotees come to this standard? I've asked that question myself. I've seen a lot of, not a lot, but I've seen a fair amount of energy directed toward saying, okay, we understand if you can't come to the higher standard, we understand that for you at this point, maybe just following as best as you can will be the best way to go. If you can't strictly follow, you can follow a lesser principle, and trying to encourage people. And it's fine. We recognize that not everyone will immediately come to the standard. But then the next thing is, what are the things I can do? It shouldn't be that the lesser standard, as it's sometimes called, or the less strict standard, as it's sometimes called, becomes normative. That this is really the standard. The 4 rules basically means no gambling, no intoxication, no meat eating, and try to, as long as you're having sex that's only within marriage, that's enough. There is more to it, and to water that down or wish it away or sweep it under the rug is not ultimately going to help us. So there needs to be instruction. If my wife and I both want to advance in Krishna consciousness, we're both following the lesser standard, but we want to come to the higher standard, what do we have to do? What are some of the things that are going to help us? I've seen precious little about that. So that is one of the topics that I have in my outline for discussion as we continue this seminar. What do we do? What are the things that we can do? Practical, step by step, one by one. Yes, Tulsi Priya, the hand is there.
Maharaj, I was going to type in the chat box, smoke 1 less cigarette a day. But I was remembering something that a friend of mine told, and I'm going to keep it as anonymous as possible in case some people are feeling critical of the instruction given. But she was married, and I think her children she had several children, a couple of them were teenagers, and the youngest was like maybe 7 years old. And she told me, and her husband was not a devotee. She was an initiated devotee, but her husband wasn't. But he was very, supportive and tolerant, but not interested in the least. And she told me that her husband wanted to keep having sex with her, and she didn't know what to do. And she took it to her spiritual master, who told her that she should serve her husband very nicely and be very, very affectionate with him, but under no circumstances should she have sex with him. And I thought, I didn't get it at first. I was thinking that's like, she's going to be nice to him. That's going to make him more attracted to him, to her. And then this was 25 years ago that she told me this. And I was thinking, well, maybe the idea is that if he could find no fault with her as a wife, if she was very loving and served him nicely and everything, then he wouldn't have any reason to leave her for not having sex. And so he would have two choices then, is either get a woman on the side and not leave her, but, you know, take care of his physical needs, quote unquote, apart from her, or that he would gradually become purified and also stay with her, and the marriage would be saved, or he would leave and at least she hadn't been broken. So I was just wondering, I don't know if there's another way of seeing that instruction, that's how I took it, is that he would have no claim against her, no complaint, I mean, against her. And you know, he if he wanted to, he could find his own way to, you know, satisfy himself, and she would still be following the principles. But I was wondering if you had another take on that kind of instruction.
Well, not really. This is the sort of thing that I, as a sannyasi, I really don't get deep into. It's also, I don't claim any special expertise on this. I will observe that these are shastric instructions to please the husband, to keep the home nice for the husband, to speak sweetly to the husband. And that is a lot of what people are looking for in married life. You know, who wants a wife who's like bitchy and can't wait for you to come home so she can dump on you, and you know, doesn't want to cook because, you know, she was, you know, it's just like too much, and, you know, I'm busy working, and you know, there's you can send out for something, you know, the whole sort of cold and self-centered and inattentive approach to the relationship. That's not going to, you know, what are we going on there? But some, you know, a lot of what people are looking for in a relationship is simple encouragement, affection, recognition of, you know, like some positive encouragement. And if that, you know, all other things aside, that should be there. And that is one of the duties of the wife, to make the home pleasant, to, you know, that guy is out there working, make the home pleasant, and to encourage the husband, and so on. So those things should be there regardless of other considerations. And yes, that may help with the other issues. But again, I'm not going to offer my learned opinion about this, because I'm not very learned on in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Again, our custom here, by the way, is to stop a couple of minutes early so that people can sign on to the Tuaco channel for their 8 o'clock class. So we do have a few more minutes here, but so this is like an early warning to myself and others that we will stop after a couple of minutes. Confirmed. I do have more from other things on my outline. I have a letter from Prabhupada about what the devotee should do in regard to Garbhadhan Samskara. I have a whole section on what Prabhupada says about strictly following. I have sections on various other issues that touch upon that also have to do with illicit sex. There's more. I don't have to just keep saying the same things again and again. So we do have enough to justify, I think, at least 2 more sessions of this discussion. And again, you know, there is scope for sort of getting deeper into particulars of marital conundrums and specific issues and so on. It's just that I'm not, we'll have to do that elsewhere, because I'm not fit for it. And well, it's just outside the scope of this Istagosti. But if you have, you know, but I encourage you to seek to discuss this elsewhere if it's relevant for you. And as Raj Bihari, who I think said, you know, find someone senior who's, I forget if he said this to me in the car as we were driving today, or if he said it today on the seminar, but, you know, pays to have people that we can confide in who are advanced in Krishna consciousness and whom we trust, who will give us advice, who will help us work our way through some of these issues. But for these issues, sannyasis are probably not going to be your go-to people.
Useless, totally useless.
They're totally useless. Yes. And determined to remain so.
Yes. No, but Mara, it's just what we need to hear from you is the principles and the standards. And then
Exactly.
someone you know may have to hear the details of a specific situation, which is going to be different than another situation, and apply those principles intelligently.
Exactly, and that's my goal here is that let's see what Prabhupada said. Let's see what principles he did prescribe for us, and then as far as, you know, very particular issues that may arise in family life, well, that can be in another form. Tulsi Priya had a comment to Murli Gopal. Why aren't there more practical seminars to help devotees come to the standard? She says, I don't know if it's so difficult to follow, but that we haven't made up our minds that we want to follow it. We have doubts. When you aren't convinced, anything is more difficult. And I would add to that, I think this tendency to sort of institutionalize a lower standard works against us. You know, then the stand and the, you know, even the terminology, the lesser standard, the less strict standard. I don't know that it was ever a standard.
That's right.
You know, but it becomes like, because we don't want to discourage anyone, because we don't want to break the code of the West by saying a discouraging word. You know, we sort of like give our blessings to something less than what Srila Prabhupada instructed, and not just say, well, we understand that this is where you are and you're working to something higher, but more or less saying, well, if that's where you are, that's okay. You know, we love you, and fine, carry on. That becomes our enemy. We're perfectly, I think we can all understand that there are people who at some point in their life have a problem with smoking, have a problem with gambling, have a problem with drinking, have a problem with illicit sex. And if they say, you know, I have a problem, and they're willing to address that problem, then they'll make progress. There's a verse in, well, you can read it on your own. Braj Bihari Prabhu pointed it out to me today, and we will examine it in, you know, with focus. But meanwhile, Srimad Bhagavatam 11, 20, 27 to 28, as well as 29, speak to this matter. And that said, and since it's 8 o'clock sharp, we wish you all a Krishna conscious week, and we look forward to seeing those of you who wish to return next Thursday. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.